As empathic, sensitive people, we're often having discussions about other people's energy, taking on other people's energy. But what about from a healer perspective? This is actually a community question that I'm going to be answering in this video. Essentially, is it ever okay for a healer to actually take on somebody else's trauma for a healing purpose? That is what we're breaking down in this video. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, I'm Leslie Huddart here, if we haven't met already. I'm a healer and spiritual guide and an acupuncturist, and I help healers, empaths, and highly sensitive people release the trauma trapped in their body so that you can actually live life and make use of all the other healing things that you've done. By really understanding how the wiring of the subtle body works, we get through blocks faster and at deeper levels than you may have done, even if you've done everything else there is to do. So in this video, what we're talking about is we're answering a great community question from Sarah Grace. Thank you so much for submitting this question. And she is asking, Leslie, is it ever okay as a healer to actually take the trauma of another person into one's own system to transmute and process it on their behalf? To literally take it on and take it away from the person it originated with. Is this actually empowering them to carry on without the trauma, or is it robbing them of the things that they came to do on this earth school? Does it or could it ever work to transmute another person's pain, or is it actually a boundary issue, notwithstanding this issue of consent? This is a great question. In my view, first of all, a couple of things. Let's break it down. Number one, the ability for someone to actually take on the origin and sort of source of someone else's trauma would be a very high level and need a high level of not healership, but internal wiring, spiritual level evolution. And that is a very rare thing. So in general, for this first point, number one, is it even possible? I would say the beings who have that ability to do it, and I think they do exist, generally don't, because they are generally very spiritually advanced beings, well then are really aligned with what is really happening. That brings us to point number two. Just this question in general of whether we should or we shouldn't is a lack of a solid, what I call working spiritual hypothesis. In another way, it's a lack of a deeper understanding of how and why things really work. We have to be standing on and asking questions about, why does suffering arise in the first place? Suffering is not random. If someone is going through something positive or negative, depending on your spiritual worldview, I'll share sort of the basics of mine and where I'm coming from general levels of non-dual Eastern sort of wisdom, is that nothing is freaking happening by accident. So trauma and pain are also in there. So for me or any healer as an individual to think that it would be a good idea to even take that from someone means that I am missing a hole in a big understanding of what I think is really happening in the universe. So for all of us, especially people who are doing professional healing work with other people, I recommend that you develop and stand on your own what I would call working spiritual hypothesis. If you need help with that, do a little link. I got a serious, in-depth, practical spirituality course that'll walk you through that and a lot of other things into really standing on a spiritual framework that actually works for you in a judge by results practical sort of way. So, one, people who actually can transmute energy probably don't, because two, there are ways and rules and reasons why people are suffering. The true spiritual path by any religious or spiritual tradition must have an explanation for why we're here, why people suffer, what is the purpose of this life, what are the forces that are really at play, where is the true benefit to be found, what is really real and what is really illusion. These are very deep questions, and all of them point to various aspects of the fact that suffering is not random and pain does not arise by some sort of mistake. Now, granted, the understanding number three is that we are always playing two different games simultaneously as embodied human beings. We are playing an inner world game, which has to do with our working spiritual hypothesis about what we think the nature of this phenomenal reality is. It has to do with deeper questions of how we connect with ourselves, who and what we think we really are in a deep elemental spiritual truth reality with a capital T type of way. That's the inner world game. And then simultaneously, we are playing an outer world game. We have a body. We have a name that we give to that body. We have a personality encased within that body and behind that name. We do jobs. We have relationships with other people that seem separate from us. This is what I would call the outer world, or the video game level of reality. Now, in the video game, we are doing things as a healer and a professional, acupuncturist for many years. In my clinic, people would come to me with issues that they needed to fix. And I once heard a really great description, forgive me for not remembering exactly where it was, but it was a discourse on this idea of healing. And the truth is that a healer is meant to work against disease and help to change the situation for another person. But that's the outer world process. That's the outer world work. And yet at the same time, what is happening, and what I would say must happen for a next level healer, is that at the same time as doing that video game, healing, helping the person to ameliorate what is happening in their physical and emotional and sometimes spiritual body, is what's happening inward is the clinician must be also standing in their inner world on a strong platform of their own definition of what they think is happening and the nature of suffering in itself. All sorts of healthcare practitioners take oaths, and generally they start with first, do no harm. And I'm particularly fond of the acupuncturist's code, or at least the one that I have sworn to as part of my formation as an acupuncturist. And in that developed statement is not just that I commit to first do no harm, but I also commit myself to cultivating myself in alignment with nature. And I also dedicate myself to the understanding of the nature of suffering, which goes far beyond how aches and pains work. It goes far beyond how ATP or inflammatory cytokines work. Understanding the nature of suffering involves a deeper understanding of not just what happens in the human body, but seeing the human body and people's relationship to that, and the pain and the joys that arise within that as a microcosm within the macrocosm of the wider system. So I digress slightly, coming back to the question. Nope, don't think it's a good idea to take on, even try to take on someone else's suffering. I don't think it's possible for most people, and if it is, you shouldn't be doing it. It's a violation of our basic 50% lines about what's mine to do, what's my dharma, what's my role. It would be me as a healer kind of getting into other people's business, other people's suffering, which is sort of what you're hinting about in your question when asked in a good way. It is a violation of what I'm here to do and what is arising for someone else. And it's also a violation of my 50% line with God in the universe. I'm saying that something that has arisen outside of my purview is somehow wrong and I need to change it. Woo, that's God in the universe's business, and I do not need to be working in that one. So if we rectify our 50% lines, we show up in the outer world as helpers and healers in a way that we are asked for, generally also compensated in exchange, and we feel moved to do in a way that is within our capacity and in alignment with our own personal spiritual working hypothesis. Great, big and wide question. I hope this answered helps, and really super blessings on the healer path. Not just really for what it does for other people, but what it does for ourselves. My personal viewpoint is that offering healing services to others is rocket fuel for our own personal development. I am personally deeply grateful to all of my teachers and my formations in the healing arts, because I've seen not just, yes, as a side note, it gave me a lot of tools and continues to help other people in relieving their suffering, but it has magnified and increased the speed at which I was able to dig through and continue to really refine myself ultimately at the inner world and outer world level. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are a wonderful, amazing soul with a body, and you deserve great things. I hope that you are well, holding you in my heart. This is Leslie Huddart, and I'll see you next time.